yeah, I figured we'd produce 100,000 litres of bread this year, and we produced it in like a month and a half. So there it is. So our bakery has just been sitting around making nothing for the entire year almost. I don't expect it of the flour mill, but because I've also got the improve productions mod running, which allows you to level up a building by buying it again. So if the flour mill costs 70,000, if I go to the flour mill and purchase it again for about 70,000, it doubles its production. So I don't have to place 10 buildings on a map of the same type to be able to produce all the things I want to produce. I can just level up the building and have it increase its production. It ends up costing me more to run because obviously increased production. But from a map aspect, it saves space, but it isn't really cheating because I have to buy the building twice in order to double my production. So no big there. The flour mill I haven't bothered increasing in that way, because the flour mill, so long as you don't, if you're growing just one thing like wheat, it's going to take time to process all of the wheat. But if you put wheat, barley and sorghum in there, it will process all of them at the normal maximum rate for each one. So you can quadruple the production on that mill just by distributing what crops you're growing. I believe if you wanted to do textiles, you can you can do the do some sheep and grow cotton, and your textiles will produce twice as quick because it's two different things that you're producing. However, when you take the textiles or the cloth down to the... Do I go in here? Yes. When you take the cloth down to the tailor shop, it will only produce them at the tailor shop rate. So you're going to need 2 or 3 tailor shops to keep up with a production that includes all of the all of the cloth that sheep and cotton can produce. Okay, I will, I guess, drive this into here, and we will start unfolding the things. So it's just, and what we've been what we'll be looking at later, I guess, is, I'll buy a production. I see how much we produce, i.e. how much we use in a year, and then figure out if, in order to keep up with our raw material production, we keep we have sufficient processing capacity. So all of our flour got processed, or all of our grains got processed into flour. That wasn't a problem. But the bakery could not keep up with the flour production, even basic. So we were producing more flour per year than the bakery could actually handle per year. So I was artificially limiting how much the bakery, or we delivered to the bakery enough for a year's supply. With the dairy, at least initially, I did level up the dairy, so it's producing more than the base game dairy. But our cows are chucking out 70,000 litres of milk per game day, which is 1/3 of a month. So almost 225,000 litres of milk is coming out of those cows per month. And the dairy can't handle that much. So last year I was selling the milk because I had 5 years worth of milk in the dairy. At the dairy's, at that time, current production rate. However, because the production rate is now 4 times what it used to be, the dairy does not have enough milk for an entire year. And so we are going to be shipping all of our milk to the dairy. The dairy, while I leveled it up once, I'm now looking at it and saying, it might actually be able to produce all of the milk, or process all of the milk we produce, 75,000 or 200,000 litres per day. So that might be a thing we need to take care of. So twin joysticks and rudder pedals. So you'll be able to drive a skid steer properly. Or maybe fly an aeroplane. One of the two. Or maybe fly a spaceship. I must admit, when it comes to joysticks, I do believe in joysticks for aeroplanes. Is a definite thing. I have, and early on I tried some racing games, and the only control system I had was a joystick, and quite frankly, racing cars and joysticks doesn't work for me at all. So, and I know back in the 90s the Saab engineers did try something like that, and they basically looked at road vehicles and said the problem is with road vehicles is there's this huge steering wheel right in front of the driver, so we have to arrange all of the instrument cluster so that the driver can see the instruments between the steering wheel spokes, and we can only put in a small airbag, because that's all that will fit into the steering wheel, which is where we need to put the airbag for a driver. Passenger gets a much bigger airbag, so this is less than ideal. So they actually took one of their cars and they basically turned the steering system into a fly-by-wire joystick like the aeroplanes have. And the test driver, or the Saab engineers, were quite happy because, hey look, we can get a full-sized airbag into the console, we can put the instruments exactly where we want them without regards to the steering wheel getting in the way, and everything's so much better. And the test driver said, kind of, the issue is that it's a fly-by-wire system, and you'd be surprised how much you rely on feedback through the steering to feel the road. You're feeling the road surface. You're feeling, when you hit bumps in the road, it makes the vehicle change direction very slightly. And the test drivers were basically saying, we can't feel that through a joystick. There was also the other issue that even if we release it into the general market, nobody drives a car with a joystick. But maybe in about 10 years' time, the gaming kiddies of the world will be right up there with, well, we've been driving, Colin McRae's rally simulator with a joystick for the last 15 years. So actually having a joystick in our family sedan works for us. But all the old people would just be like, joystick, not working for me. And people would have to effectively relearn how to drive. But yeah, I'm of the age where driving with a joystick just doesn't work. Yes, indeed, logging equipment. That did actually cross my mind as well. But on this farm, I do have a number of skid steers. Actually, do I have a number? I have one. I have a few tele trucks. No, I do have. I think I've got 2 tele trucks, 1 skid steer out at the production facilities, and then the arable farm has an ancient skid steer for unloading the solid stuff back into the farm silos. And the cow farm now has a telehandler because I decided it's so much easier to pick things up with the telehandler than it is with a skid steer when you're trying to load up things like bale shredders and TMR mixers. You need the extra height that a skid steer just doesn't quite have. Okay. So again, reason for doing this entire field manually is it's too small to have the baler follow me for 90% of the time. So we do that. We fold that up, we lift that, we fold it up. And I can park that right there. Jump here, unfold it, lower the pickup, and turn it on. Now this may not be as accurate as, oh hello dear, I have, there we go, lower that. I have a deer in my front yard eating my shrub. Oh. Now fortunately, because this does... oh, bye dear. Because this will unload the wrapped bale on the go, I am less likely to end up with a bale on a swath of grass. How many? Actually, it's just one deer, which is strolling very very casually across the road. So yeah, with my house, it's a 4-bedroomed house. We have 3 of the bedrooms are along the front of the house, including the master, and then the 4th bedroom is at the back, which is actually Mrs. Osa's crafting room, where she keeps all her crafting supplies and what have you. And then the office is at the front of the house, and living room, kitchen are all at the back. So because the office is at the front of the house, I have the curtain open so I can A, see who comes to the front door, and B, see the random squirrels and turkeys and deers strolling across the yard, and the odd weird dog coming to visit, which was a thing on Saturday stream. Still don't know what that was about, but strange dog visitors. I am completely messing this up by missing when the bale is complete. We'll try and catch that one. How about that? Yes, I think of the people in this family, I have probably been the most adventurous. Back in the UK, something I miss in America, there are a lot of country pubs which serve food as well as being drinking establishments. Now the thing with those is that you can, they're very convenient to, let's go for a drive. You end up out in the countryside, there's a pub, oh, they're going to have food. And they usually have really, really nice food. City pubs, not so much. City pubs tend to be a little bit more, what's the word for it? A little bit more drinking establishments for people who've finished work or tourists, depending on the city. But really, everywhere else, food is probably the big draw. And the problem is with a country pub is there's like nobody lives close to it. So it's not like people are going to walk down the pub to have a drink. People who turn up will be in motor vehicles, so someone's going to be driving. And frankly, in situations like that, if I'm going out for a drink with friends, I'm going out for a drink with all of my friends, and we all want to have a drink. So we'll walk down to the local pub in town rather than get in a car and go drive. So these things, these country pubs are far more family-oriented pubs. You can get beer, but the primary reason to visit it is not to have copious amounts of beer, it's to sample their food. So the food has to be good, and generally it is. I am so disoriented here. Oh, I see where I am. So yes, it's one of those things that Americans just don't seem to have much in the way of. But most of the corporations I worked for back in England were out in the countryside. So they were converted, one of the places was a converted water mill that was now an office. Another one was a small country home. I wouldn't class it as a manor. Quite a nice home that had just, adjacent to it, they just attached modern office buildings and what have you. But, every so often we decide, I fancy something a little bit more substantial for lunch. Let's go to the pub and have something to eat. And as I said, you just don't have that here. And I have no idea why I got onto that subject. But yes, the food is awesome at those places. So if you're out in England, out in the countryside, and you see a pub and you're hungry, go in and sample the food, because it's going to be worth it. Oh, I'm not sure I can make that turn. Yes, I can. Not quite as manoeuvrable as the Massey Ferguson, but definitely a good thing. But yes, it's those. So, oh yes, I remember why I was on that subject. So yes, I've had at various pubs around England, I've had deer, and I've had rabbit, and trout, and all sorts of interesting things that Mrs. Osa and teenage Osa aren't so inclined to eat. There we go. Let's light up like a Christmas tree so I can see what's in the shadows. Speaking of shadows, I kind of decided it's been a while, so time to take a little time, a little bit of viewing time out to rewatch Babylon 5 and pick up some of the clues I missed way back when I first watched it. I got the series on DVD, and sadly the DVDs are skipping on our DVD player, so a little bit upset by that, but a little look around the internet and I found that Babylon 5 is currently streaming on Tubi. So yes, watching that, and if you've watched it you'll know why shadows are bad, or good, depending on your point of view. Maybe Vorlons are bad. Oh, let's go this way. And we are nearly full. We are full. Yeah, I mean, we do have, I think the places that serve alcohol and food tend to be sports bars. And yeah, that's more of a thing in America. Whereas, the UK, it's definitely a pub of some description. Let's go this way. And round here. But yeah, I think probably the nearest you have in America is sports pubs. Or Irish pubs, I'll give you that. But those tend to be in towns. I think the stuff we find in the countryside tends to be small eateries, like down the 94 between Jackson and Kalamazoo. There is a place called the Moonraker, which is, it's a place you visit for food only. Good food actually there. When we were doing the initial visits with teenager who isn't, or the person who is now teenager, but wasn't at the time, we would usually meet up for an afternoon down at an ice cream parlour or something like that, where we could get to know people, know each other. And so we would stop off at the Moonraker and have some food before getting to the ice cream parlour. And they do the usual burgers and stuff, but they do have sort of other things like America's version of generic fish and chips, which, I think it's usually cod, but it's an unidentified white fish mashed up and then wrapped in beer batter. Again, go to England, have fish and chips. You walk into a fish and chip shop in England and they ask you, what type of fish do you want? Because they have all the types. Or all the local types. It's another thing you learn about fish is that fishes in Europe are not the same as fishes in America. Can we do it nearly full? And so you're probably going to get very wet if you do that. Because there's a lot of water between Scotland and Ireland. Actually, interesting little fact. Obviously, England was a Celtic nation before the Saxons and the Normans invaded, and the Celts have their own language, and it varies. Scottish Celtic is slightly different from Irish Celtic, is different from Welsh, is different from Cornish, but they share roots, if you like. But when it comes to Ireland, the first recorded writing, when it comes to Welsh, the first recorded writings in Welsh was made by monks living in Scotland on the southwest coast, which is now, I believe, round about where the ferry to Ireland goes from. So, just a weird fact. But yeah, and the thing is that back in those days, nobody went anywhere, or nobody went far. So your language generally stagnated into something all of the locals spoke. But if you went a little bit further afield, there were variations. Kind of like in America with New York, there are definite differences in speech between the districts in New York. Not so much that I can tell the difference, being a non-native, but someone who lives in New York can tell someone who lives from someone from Queens, someone from Brooklyn, etc., etc. Similarly, until fairly recently in the UK, you could tell someone from your cluster of villages and the cluster of villages that were 20 miles down the road.